इवन कि जो आज स्पोर्ट्स के हवाले से क्रिकेट वो भी जो उनका भी आइन था उन्होंने लिखा, तो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन मिनॉरिटी राइट फोरम की टीम।
थैंक यू वेरी मच मिस्टर सैमुअल प्यार। मैं ये समझता हूँ कि जितनी भी क्लैपिंग आपने सैमुअल साहब के लिए की है वो थोड़ी है, और शायद हम वो काम नहीं कर सकते। कई दफ़ा सुबह सुबह इन्हें कॉल करें तो ये कहते हैं यार मैं तो ट्रेन में बैठा हूँ और आज केस है और मैं इस्लामाबाद जा रहा हूँ। तो ये बहुत डेडिकेशन है। वी प्रे दैट he will do all his efforts. This conference is a unique event in the history of Pakistan, when all stakeholders of the justice sector, such as judges of the superior courts, judicial officers, representative of the bar councils, all minorities, our respectable clergy are brought together in consultative process. The topic of today's conference is privilege of minorities in the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. So now I invite our first guest speaker, Right Reverend Bishop Azad Marshall, the Moderator, Bishop of Church of Pakistan and Chairman National Churches Council Pakistan. Please come forward to grace the dais and show his inspiring thoughts.
Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Justice Umar Atta Bandial Sahab, Tassaduq Hussain, Jillani, former Chief Justice Sahab, Mr. Justice Sadal Sahab, bishops of the Church of Pakistan who have been introduced, respected clergy of other churches, diplomats, ambassadors, representatives of religious minorities, Mr. Samuel Payara, Chairman and Implementation Minority Rights for Pakistan. Indeed, he has an amazing energy to organize all of us at this occasion. I have my written notes, but I will shorten this, but I would like to say something in Urdu before I do that. It's a very unique occasion. ये एक बड़ा खास मौका है कि मैं दो चीफ जस्टिस की और मिस्टर जस्टिस सदन साहब की प्रेजेंस में it is really I remember my college days. I knew Chief Justice Azad very well, and he was very kind to us, like a family friend, and we used to be able to go to हम जब चाहते उनके पास चले जाते। तो मैं एक ज़मीर का कैदी था हमारा, जिसके लिए हम गोया जंग लड़ रहे थे। तो एक दिन जब उनकी मौत हो गई कैद खाने में, तो मैं ये सोच के कि मैं चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ पाकिस्तान को जानता हूँ, मैं उनके पास चला गया। गाड़ियाँ खड़ी थी, वो कोयटा जाने के लिए जा रहे थे, और मैंने किसी वो जो स्टाफ है वो कहा जी मैं उनको मिलने आया। उन्होंने कहा जी आप कौन है? मैंने कहा जी मैं उनको जानता हूँ, आप मेरा नाम बता दीजिए, अगर आप बता देंगे तो वो जरूर मुझे मिलने का मौका देंगे। लो है उन्होंने कहा उसको अंदर बुलाओ। मैं अंदर गया, रास्ता I was crying because of my friend who had lost his life. तो उन्होंने मुझे पहले सुनते रहे बड़े प्यार से, फिर एकदम कुछ हुआ, वो बड़े बैठ गए, कहने लगे, Do you know that you are talking to the Chief Justice of Pakistan? मैंने कहा, मैं भी डर घबरा गया। मैंने कहा जी ऐसा ही है, so you better say whatever you are saying, it better be true. मैंने कहा जी वो भी मैं इसीलिए तो आया हूँ आपके पास। And then he asked for a steno to come, and he said, "This is your statement about that gentleman." And he very kindly then orders to investigate further. So I remember how kind and loving Chief Justices are, of course, with a lot of authority that they carry. Ladies and gentlemen, I will go back to my English notes. It is an honor for me to pay homage to the late former Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Alvin Robert Cornelius, and acknowledge his contributions to the judicial history of Pakistan as a prominent jurist and legal philosopher. Justice Cornelius' work speaks for itself. His courage, his integrity and fairness continues to inspire generations of lawyers and judges in Pakistan and beyond. He was a staunch defender of the rule of law and advocate for judicial independence. Although he was a Christian by faith, Justice Cornelius had a deep understanding of both Hinduism and Islam in South Asia, which was reflected in his work. Foremost amongst his legal philosophy was a synthesis of Islamic ideas and Western thought. In numerous judgments, Justice Cornelius used Islamic principles, especially the concept of adl wa insaf, and employed it in the local context. Jurists consider it the most significant intervention in the development of Pakistani judiciary. During his tenure as the Chief Justice, Justice Cornelius also tried to broaden, solidify, and enforce human fundamental rights in Pakistan. Even though Pakistan did not have parliamentary democracy throughout his tenure as the Chief Justice, yet he tried to ensure that the courts played their part in the protection and enforcement of fundamental rights in the country. Striving for justice is striving for the delight of God's heart. Justice is about visibility. Justice is close to God's heart. Justice is God's idea. This does not originate with us. The Old Testament prophet Micah's challenging words describe that justice is not just an ideology, but that which he requires alongside the pillars of mercy, love, and humility for society to taste shalom, peace, and peaceful order for the functioning of the world. A just society must also ensure that individuals are not discriminated against on the basis of their religion or belief, and that they are able to access same opportunities and protections as all other members of society. This includes access to education, employment, healthcare, and other basic services, as well as the right to participate fully in the political and social life of the community. When justice is not upheld and individuals are persecuted and discriminated against because of their religion or belief, it can lead to conflict, instability, and breakdown of social trust. I'm shortening it by going back to the word of the scriptures. We are here, I would like to say, this afternoon, we are here by God's plan and design in response to the cry of God's people around the world. God's heart has always been moved by the plight of the vulnerable. Moses was raised up when the Israelites cried out to God and groaned under the heavy burden of slavery. Exodus, book in the Torah, it is written that the crying and groaning comes to God's heart, and God's heart is moved. When the crying goes to God's heart, then God moves. In Psalm 102, David cried out to God, pleading that God will look down from his sanctuary and bring close to and the human experience that compels even David to recognize that We are all vulnerable to injustice and mercilessness. As we have heard from our dear Father James Shannon, that Jesus Christ too laid out his priorities, proclaimed justice as a key among them to bring healing and salvation to the suffering humanity. One of the cherished goals that we all have is to create a pluralistic Pakistani society where fundamental rights are respected. But it will continue to elude us unless we realize that we are living in a world of globalized interdependence, a world of interconnectivity, of cyberspace, of shrunken distances, of cross-border migration, and a world of rapidly changing cultural identities. We are all members of one race of humans with common challenges, and we cannot confront these challenges without forging a common alliance. Article 20 of Pakistan's Constitution does not merely allow a person a private right to profess their faith, but confers a right to practice their faith both privately and publicly. Moreover, it confers the additional right not only to profess and practice their own religion, but to have the right to propagate their religion to others. It is important to note that this propagation of religion has not been limited only to Muslims who have having the right to propagate their religion, but this right is equally conferred on non-Muslims to propagate their religion to their own community and to their own people. This should not be seen as a right to encourage conversion, but more importantly, should be seen as a right against forced conversion or imposing belief on others. Islam does not compel people of other faiths to convert. It has given them complete freedom to retain their own faith and not to be forced to become Muslims. This freedom is documented both in the Holy Quran and Sunnah. Though Islam has categorically emphasized the protection of religious minorities, I am compelled to say that we still have a long way to go in ensuring the implementation of these Islamic injunctions in letter and spirit. Crucial challenges include the religious conversion and forced marriages of underage minority girls. The misuse of blasphemy laws continues to haunt our communities. It is imperative that the child marriage restraint laws are fully implemented and legislation is carried out to protect minor girls from being forced to change their religion. We need to understand that such conversions and marriages are a cover for sexual exploitation of children, and disconnect with the state law and Sharia law is helping the perpetrators to elude justice. Abuse of the blasphemy law is also a serious cause of concern, not just for non-Muslims, but for Muslims too. We have repeatedly called for implementation or effective procedural and institutional safeguards at the investigative and judicial level to prevent the misuse of these laws, but this issue also remains unaddressed. Before concluding, I would like to draw your attention to another important issue that has a direct bearing on my community side. We are already perturbed by the results of 2017 census, which we believe grossly understates the Christian population. Now that the government is conducting Pakistan's first digital census, we are again hearing complaints of undercounting, faulty questionnaires, and delayed tactics by numerators. I hope that the Honorable Supreme Court of Pakistan, under your leadership, will take notice of these concerns and direct the government to ensure a thorough and transparent census process. And in conclusion, may we cherish the legacy left by Justice Edmund Robert Cornelius as an example and a staunch defender of the rule of law for promotion of Adl o Insaf in Pakistan. Pakistan Zindabad.
Justice Tassaduq and Jillani, former Chief Justice of Pakistan, for his thoughts.
Honorable Chief Justice of Pakistan, Mr. Umar Bandial, Chairman of Minority Rights Forum, Payara, Bishop John, our distinguished citizen, Syed Babar Ali, Excellencies, Ambassador from Germany and Argentina, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great honor to be here to receive the award dedicated to Mr. Justice Cornelius, an illustrious former Chief Justice of this country. While this award is an acknowledgement of the humble contribution made by me for the enforcement of religious freedom and minority rights guaranteed in the Constitution. And as I accept the award, I dedicate this to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who in his last sermon to the people of Makkah said, and I quote, "All mankind from Adam and Eve, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black, except by good conduct." Unquote. I dedicate this award to the founder of this country, Azad Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who in his first speech to the Constituent Assembly said, and I quote, you are free to go to your temples, you are free to go to your mosques, or any other place of worship in the state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state. Unquote. And lastly, I dedicate this award to the makers of the Constitution of this country, which in its very preamble provides a vision that Pakistan would be a state wherein the principles of democracy, freedom, equality, tolerance, and social justice, as enunciated by Islam, shall be fully observed, wherein legitimate interests of minorities and backward and depressed classes shall be fully protected. Article 20 grants freedom to every citizen to profess his or her religion, and Article 25 guarantees equality before law and protection before law. Honorable Chief Justice, I recall while hearing the case which led to the judgment on minority rights and religious freedom, the court was conscious that religion in public affairs has many a times led to societal conflicts. A country where the national literacy rate is 58%, where some are afflicted with religious illiteracy, and where the absence of ijtihad leads to a myopic view of religious tenets, it is vulnerable to extremism which generates pressure and an atmosphere of fear. Our judicial system at times is not free from such pressures, which cannot be attributed to politicians. One of the biggest threats to judicial freedom, Honorable Chief Justice, is this religious orthodoxy. In such socio-economic milieu, the courts, and especially the Supreme Court, has an onerous duty to protect the constitutional rights of vulnerable groups, particularly minorities. The courts have to play a more proactive role for the enforcement of human rights, the rule of law, and religious freedom. The court, I must add, should act as a pedagogical institution to educate the people about the Constitution and its seminal values. It was this perception which persuaded me to take the only suo motu nostra I took during my tenure as the Chief Justice of Pakistan of a bomb blast in a church in Peshawar, wherein 81 Christians died when they were offering prayers. During the proceeding, I also took notice of a newspaper report that Kalash tribe and Ismailis in Chitral were being coerced to convert to a different sect within Islam or face death. The court was conscious of three things. Number one, that to dislodge misperception of religious rights about our faith and to give a counter and enlightened narrative. Number two, that the court has to dilate on the import of fundamental rights of religious freedom and belief in the Constitution. And number three, the functionaries of the state have to be reminded and sensitized about their duties in the enforcement of fundamental rights. In a detailed judgment, I issued 8 directives, which included changing the school curriculum, banning hate speeches, creation of a special police to protect the places of worship of minorities, and establishment of a National Council on Minority Rights to ensure its implementation. I directed that a 3-member bench of the Supreme Court should be created. It gives me immense pleasure to say that the said bench is still seized of the matter because the implementation of the judgment requires a continuous mandamus. However, the latest reports of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan strikes a discordant note as it has identified specific instances of minorities facing persecution, marginalization, forced conversions, and misuse of blasphemy laws. The inspirational commands embodied in Surah Maida and Surah Baqarah have not been heeded to. Notwithstanding this note from the Human Rights Commission, the judgment has struck a responsive chord and has given a hope to vulnerable groups and minorities of Pakistan to work for the creation of a society where the Constitution and its abiding values reign supreme. As long as this hope and struggle continues, the struggle for democracy shall not fail, because as Learned Hand said, and I quote, "Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies, no constitution, no law, and no court can save it." Unquote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As an educationist, I would like to request Chief Justice that 2% quota for all in colleges and universities is implemented, but in the professional colleges it is yet not been implemented. So kindly have overlooked it. And now I request Chief Justice Mr. Justice Umar Bandial to come forward to deliver his speech.
I'm a judge. We are here to celebrate one of our former luminaries from the Supreme Court. So I start with a verse of the Holy Quran, which speaks about justice and also talks about judges. This is from Surah An-Nisa, verse 135. O believers, be upholders of justice and bearers of witness to truth for the sake of Allah, even though it may be either against yourselves or against your parents and kinsmen, or the rich or the poor. For Allah is more concerned with their well-being than you are. Do not then follow your own desires, lest you keep away from justice. And now for us. If you twist or turn away from the truth, know that Allah is well aware of all that you do. Justice Cornelius was an embodiment of justice. It's not been mentioned to you, I'll just share this with you. He stood first in the examinations administered by the Allahabad University for matriculation, for intermediate, and for BSc Honours. He was a graduate in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And at a young age of about 23 years, he was selected by the Premier Service of India, the Indian ICS, the Indian Civil Service. The finest men and women were selected there. And thereafter he went to Selwyn College, Cambridge, where again he excelled. What I'm impressing upon you is that such a brilliant man who was in the civil service, who would have reached the heights of prominence in the policy-making circles, in the administrative circles, within 4 years said no to all that. And in 1930, he joined the judiciary. In the judiciary, at a very young age of I would say sometime in his 30s, he was selected, he was elevated to the High Court. I'm sorry, there's so much. So he was elevated to the judiciary at the age of 41 in the High Court, Lahore High Court. Within 7 years, ladies and gentlemen, he distinguished himself and he was elevated to the Federal Court of Pakistan. I have spent a total of 19 years in the judiciary in the High Court and the Supreme Court. Justice Cornelius spent 17 years in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. He was one of the longest serving Chief Justices of Pakistan, from 1960 to 1968.
And in times that were difficult, because Pakistan was an embryonic state, it was growing, it was trying to grapple with all the difficulties of a young country, and of course there were political issues. In 1955, Justice Cornelius, who was by then in this, it was called the Federal Court. In the following year, when the Constitution came, it became the Supreme Court in 1956. In the Federal Court, he was the lone voice which said that the dissolution of the Assembly, Constituent Assembly, by the Governor General was illegal. That judgment today is hailed as an outstanding rendition of justice, for the reason that the majority decided that the Sindh High Court did not have the jurisdiction to decide the matter, and therefore there was no judgment of the Sindh High Court which could be assailed. It was an illegal judgment. The majority allowed technicality to avoid the truth. And when truth was avoided, justice was avoided. Today, one man's voice is celebrated in our circles. The rest of the men, although they include many distinguished jurists, the majority are not mentioned at all. This is the course of history, and this is the message to any judge who wants to stay on the right course. The course written for us, dictated to us, directed to us by none less than the Almighty through the Holy Quran. But that is not all about Justice Cornelius. He was a simple man. Today I am informed that he stayed in one room for 40 years. He lived there simply. He had no assets when he retired, and from his pension he paid the bills of this hotel. It was in this hotel where he lived. And I went and saw that room just now. Short while ago. But another beautiful thing about him. In 1968, he was to retire in May of 1968. But his colleague, Justice Azad, who had worked with him for years in the Supreme Court, was to retire before then. So in order that Justice Azad may become Chief Justice also, do you know what Justice Cornelius did? 2 months prior to his retirement, he resigned from office. He sacrificed. This was a man who had the capability to give and to share. These are the qualities which I submit respectfully judges must have if they have to do justice. And this is the subject of minority rights in Pakistan. Our constitution, as Ms. Sabah just told us, assures freedom to profess religion, to manage religious institutions, subject to public order and morality. Our constitution in Article 21 safeguards particular religions against taxation for purposes of any particular religion. So for no particular reason can other religions be taxed. Article 22 safeguards educational institutions in respect of religion, etc. No religious instruction or ceremony in educational institution other than one's own religion is to be given to the students. No citizen can be denied admission to educational institutions which receives aid from public revenues on the ground of race, religion, caste, place or birth. Basically, our constitution says everyone is free to profess their religion. All citizens have equal rights. There is no discrimination amongst them. And yet, for years, our minorities have felt discriminated, have felt sidelined, marginalized. It is in these circumstances, in the year 2014, some 9 years ago, the Supreme Court, under the charge of Chief Justice Tassaduq and Jillani, who sits with us right here, took up this challenge and came up with directions to protect the rights of the minorities. There were several directions that were issued. Directions about curriculum, directions to ensure that there is no hate speech on social media against minority religions, directions that a National Council for Minority Rights be established, a task force be established, and a special police force be established to protect religious places of worship. A job quota for minorities at 5% be ensured, and similarly an admission quota in education institutions be ensured. For many years, these directives were carried out under the charge of Mr. Shuaib, who sits right here. That was a one-man commission. He worked strenuously, selflessly, and achieved many objectives. I may agree with Sabah, there's a lot more to be done. But pursuant to that judgment, there was movement and a great deal was done. Today, the minorities see that judgment as an umbrella which protects their rights. Today, the Supreme Court acts as a facilitator vis-à-vis the government authorities who have been cooperative. We must not overlook the fact, ladies and gentlemen, we have been through at least 3 decades of extremism. We have lost 80,000 citizens in this country to extremism. And by the grace of God, the situation is improving. And a lot of the complaints regarding violence which the minorities had, and even Muslims had, because of sectarian rivalries, they have diminished. I think that resilience which the Pakistani nation has shown through these turbulent times is a great credit to the people of Pakistan. And with great respect, also the state of Pakistan. Things are on the mend. A task force which was not in existence has come into being recently on 16th of November 2022 under the chairmanship of the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Religious Affairs and Interfaith Harmony. The members of the task force include almost all important executive functionaries in the country, which means that the issues relating to minorities protection and minorities rights would now be handled by persons who are directly related and who have authority over the persons that will carry out the instructions. I have hope and expectation that this task force will do well. Our association with Mr. Tassaduq continues because he is a court appointee. The court has a special implementation bench. 9 years have passed, but there is an implementation bench for this judgment. And today I have been mentioned a few issues. I said file an application. You see, courts cannot pass executive orders. We cannot act on verbal statements or complaints. These matters come to us through petitions or applications. Notice is issued to the concerned parties and respondents come forward and an order is passed after hearing the parties. But these are public interest proceedings. There is nothing adversarial about that. And I may assure you, for quite some time I was the chairman of the implementation bench. Now it is headed by someone else. And we always found cooperation from the government of Pakistan, as well as the provincial governments. So, nothing to despair about. Be positive, and inshallah, we'll progress further in this direction. And it is said that leave these differences to God. Don't fight amongst yourselves. What you have to do is Amar bil Maruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Amar bil Maruf is do good deeds. Nahi anil Munkar is others who do bad deeds, just inform them and tell them, don't do this. You don't have to become violent. You don't have to become aggressive. But you should stop that. You should advise that. In relation to religion, the Surah Baqarah in ayat 256 says, there is no compulsion about religion. There is no compulsion in faith. This is your own will, your own wish. In Surah Maida, which is number 5, Surah 5, ayat 32, it is said, whoever kills one person unjustly is as though he has killed all of mankind. And whoever saves one life, it is as though he has saved all mankind. Mankind, whatever the form, whatever the color, whatever the creed, whatever the faith, is indistinguishable. There is no discrimination. That is how the Almighty considers human beings. In Surah Al-An'am 6, Surah 6, 108, the Almighty says, do not denigrate the deities of other faiths, lest in their ignorance, they disrespect Allah. Thus, Allah has made pleasing to every community their deeds. Let them do their deeds, their religious deeds. In Surah Hajj 22, ayat 40, he says, due to the intervention of Allah to protect the places of worship of other faiths, the people who were confronting and fighting with each other did not destroy those places of worship. God intervened to prevent the destruction of places of worship. This is how important they are. This is how important the right of worship is. Just like the words of the Bible have moral authority, just like the words of the Holy Quran have moral authority. Moral authority comes from something which is good, something which is pure. Our judgments have the force of moral authority when they are given in accordance with the Constitution and the law of Pakistan. Mr. Samuel Payara, Mr. Samuel Payara, the Honorable Bishop, the pastors and the bishop, it's a matter of privilege to be here. I haven't told you, this is a memorable occasion for me. Thank you very much, all of you. my best wishes, and the implementation bench is always there. File an application and let's see what happens.
I request Chief Justice Sahib to please come forward. Thank you very much for